Hello and welcome to Green Pass Gaming. I'm your host Flap, and as always, helping us steer the good ship tonight, we have in the co-hosting hot seat Puxley. Hello, Pux. How are you, mate?
Hello, Flap. I'm not too bad, thanks. How are you doing? All right.
Yeah, not too bad. Thank you very much. It's been another week, hasn't it? We've had a bit of a blowout of news.
So, yes, we finally got the Sony updates, which I'm sure we're going to be diving into in a lot of detail.
Well, I'd like to think, the main platform holders have all pretty much shown their hands by now. So there should only really be a trickle of information left. So, plenty to talk about tonight. So, but before we do that, let's introduce everyone else. As always with us on a Sunday podcast, I'd like you to welcome VJ. Hello, sir. How the devil are you?
Hey, how you doing, Flap? Yeah, all good. Thank you very much.
That's good. Also, we've got two guests tonight, as always, and, semi-regular to the show. I think it's your third time, Luke. Please welcome to the show, Luke Steele.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, happy to be here. It's been a really interesting week, actually. Lots of stuff's happened finally after so much silence, so it's going to be interesting to talk about it.
It is, and, there's lots to get our teeth into, and it's going to be nice to sort of compare what we know about both platform holders. So, plenty of discussions there. And last and by no means least, we have Michael, otherwise known as NX Gamer. Welcome to the show, sir. How the devil are you?
I'm very good. Thank you, Flap, for inviting me. Thanks, everyone, for bringing me onto this podcast. Hopefully I won't bore everyone, but yeah, good news. Lots of things to talk about. As you say, it's been a very busy week in the video game world, so I'm sure there's hopefully enough discussion to get us through the next hour and a half.
I should think so. And hi to the chat. Thanks for being here, guys. There's normally more that sort of rock up as the show go along, but Indie Gamer, Fugly, Wakanda. Oh, my good. Fun Speculation. Sweshy's here. Hi, guys. Welcome to the show. Let's have a good one. So we normally do a very quick round of what we've been playing this week. So, Pux, what have you been up to first, mate?
I have been jumping into a bit of the Call of Duty Cold War Alpha on PlayStation, having some good time with that. Okay. And I've also been playing the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection, specifically Mario Sunshine, for those that do care.
That's cool. VJ, what have you been up to? Have you been gaming much this week?
No, not at all. I've just been, as I said in the pre-show, I've just been watching Michael's videos on loop so I can keep up with the conversation today. I'm struggling, but I'll try.
You've been swatting up just to make sure you can keep up.
Yeah, it seems like it's an all-British cast today, right?
It is.
Oh, my goodness. Is this like the Spice Boys or something?
Well, I'm not going to do any singing. If you guys want to, that's fine.
Michael knows, right? On his first appearance, he has to do some singing, right?
All right, okay. I'm going to pick that.
Yeah, that's how it works, I'm afraid. Luke, have you been melting your GPU with Flight Sim still?
Yes, yeah. Although I was one of the few lucky ones to manage to get a pre-order for the 380 in. So
yeah, well done.
So nice. I'm hoping to melt that one when it arrives as well. But yeah, so playing that. Same as Puxley, actually, playing 3D All-Stars, specifically Sunshine, because it's actually one that I've never played, miraculously. Okay. So playing that, and Hades on Switch as well, which everybody should get Hades because it's a phenomenal game and it's just brilliant. So
that's cool. And Michael, what have you been up to, mate?
Well, aside work and in my normal everyday work job, just been playing a bit of Call of Duty Cold War. I always forget Black Ops. It's Black Ops. So on PS4, been playing the alpha, enjoying that. Just done a video on it. It's again impressive and it's good fun. I always like a bit of COD because it's just turn your brain off and have a run around, shoot people. It's a good de-stress, I think, as a game.
Yeah, completely agree. And I've had a dabble in the alpha build as well and really enjoyed it, actually. Quite impressed with the graphics. It feels like COD. We mentioned just before the show that throwing a grenade, there seems to be an extra 15 frames of animation in that, which absolutely frustrated the hell out of me because obviously I like to get my grenades off quick and you can't always do that in this one. But hopefully those sort of things might change. But so, yeah, it's been a hell of a week. So we've had the Sony launch event and we kind of know everything that we wanted to know. So we're going to break it down. I think what we'll do is, funny enough, we've just done this, but let's just do a quick round of the game that everyone really liked from the presentation at the event. We'll come to you first, VJ, if you don't mind. So They showed some games. There wasn't too many surprises in. There was a few games missing, like Ratchet and Clank, although we have seen quite a lot of that already, to be honest. But was there any particular game on the Sony event that sort of took your fancy?
I watched it first off, and I wasn't paying that much attention to the event. Well, I was, but more like just a fan, not really observing it critically. So I was actually going to talk about Miles Morales, but I decided to express my disappointment about another franchise, actually. I've enjoyed Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest games since the 90s, and I went back and watched the Final Fantasy 16 trailer to form a more sort of detached opinion from it.
Yep.
And this time I caught the fact that Final Fantasy 15 was being developed by someone, or a team called the Creative Business Unit 3. And I went back and had a check to see, like, okay, it's on the Lumen engine. Who was Final Fantasy 15 made by? And that was created by something called the Business Unit 2. And the first thing that came to my mind was, are these like new Final Fantasy franchises, right? Being developed by accountants, lawyers, and administrators, yeah? It's not like, it wasn't exactly an imaginative name for a development team.
Yeah,
See, normally you either feel like a real sense of amazement, or you can respect the creativity and the quality of a new Final Fantasy trailer. But compared to the reveals of all the Final Fantasies, and I've pretty much played all of them from 7 to up to 15 and the recent remake, right? And but this was by far the most underwhelming, to say the least. It felt like almost like it was an internal concept demo, right? Prepared in order to be submitted to the higher ups at, or in fact the Green Light Approval Committee, right? Square Enix. You only have to sort of compare the reimagining and the character model of Shiva, which is one of the summons in Final Fantasy VII, to the one that they showcased in this FF16 trailer, to sort of understand where I'm coming from. Final Fantasy trailers are usually sort of really recognizable, if not for all of their sort of iconic characters, really nicely tailored costume designs, and really fantastic locations. And I don't know if anyone remembers Lightning from Final Fantasy 13. I mean, she was fantastically designed, right? And she was the star, I think it was Louis Vuitton, right? She was like part of their national advertising campaign. In comparison, like these character designs that I saw in this short trailer or whatever it was, for me was incredibly generic and uninteresting. If it wasn't for the beginning of the trailer, there was like a Final Fantasy melody that was sort of subtly playing in the background. I would have been sitting in hope that it was just like a spin-off in terms of Final Fantasy Chronicles or Tactics. This was, for me, similar to how I felt when I first saw the Halo Infinite trailer, and it's definitely not in the same stratosphere in terms of Final Fantasy, the Final Fantasy VII remake. And what's really interesting to me is, I don't know if you guys like Final Fantasy, but when Eric Gainsborough was revealed, right, there was a lot of hoo-ha on Twitter and other media outlets where the Japanese gamers really didn't approve of her, and they were really vocal about it. I would really love to know what they make of this trailer. But that's pretty much my thoughts on it.
Okay, that's cool. Let's go to you next then, Michael. What was your pick of the show?
Boring one, but mine was Demon Souls. Absolutely love Demon Souls. I think it's an amazing game on the PS3. Obviously kicked off the whole Dark Souls franchise, but it's one of those games that kind of takes me back to a kid playing things on the Commodore 64 and VIC-20 even, where games were really hard, but they had that one more go kind of hook where you'd sit down till the early hours of the morning just trying to get past that one level and just trying to work out something like Big Mac, where you had to like understand where the platform was moving and jump over it. And I like Dark Souls because it can't Demon Souls, sorry, because it takes you down that route of, you understand the mechanisms, the routines, the timings, and I love all that. And I think that what they've done here is very clever, that they haven't, it's a very isolated, tight, I hate the word statement, but corridor. It's a very tight, controlled environment. So it's a great game to enable a shorter development time for the team to push something out that really pushes the next gen quality. And I think the ray trace shadows, reflections, and lighting that they've put in there looks exceptional. But I think above all else, it's hopefully a return, a sign of people starting to use some of the strong physics and better AI in titles. That's what I noticed in it. And it's going back to the original Demon Souls, which did have quite a lot of physics. Havoc engine was built into the engine itself. It was trying to push that kind of realistic physics, generated imagery and animation systems, and all that was quite new back then. And it's not really moved on massively in the whole last generation we've had. And I'm hoping that this Demon's Souls really starts to push that out. I noticed some parts in the original trailer, and I think the overall presentation of it, it's probably Blue Point's best work, where they've taken the original and really kind of managed to reinvent it but not ruin it. And I think that's a careful balance when you reimagine something as old and as grand as Demon's Souls, or what they've touched on before, which is always a delicate and temperamental situation for the fan base, as just covered there by VJ in terms of Final Fantasy. It can be people can be very passionate about when you change things just a little bit too much. So yeah, I absolutely loved Demon's Souls. I thought it was a standout title of the show, and I think it really, it's the first game I'll play on the PS5 when I get it. Absolutely.
Okay. That's interesting. Well, I mean, you mentioned this in your latest video, actually. I mean, the video quality of the actual event itself was horrendous, really, really horrendous. But when you actually see the 4K VODs afterwards, it's like, oh my God, this is a different game. It looks fantastic. And I have to agree. We'll be coming back to that point of AI, if you don't mind, a little bit later on, because I'd like to just delve into what next generation can actually mean. And I'm hoping, obviously, better AI is one of them. But Pux, what was your highlight of the show?
It wasn't really a PlayStation exclusive, but I was actually really intrigued by Hogwarts Legacy. I thought the idea of having an open world Harry Potter game, so to speak, was actually really interesting. Apparently there's a load of rumors and murmurings about this for the last few months, but these have gone completely past my radar. I hadn't heard of this before. So when I saw the announcement, I was kind of pleasantly shocked, and that it's actually kind of pre-Harry Potter, if that makes sense. It's kind of, I think it's like 100 years or the makings of Hogwarts, or it's based around that kind of era. So I think it's going to be quite interesting. But again, we didn't really see any real gameplay for it. It was all mainly just CGI, just kind of panning around the different environments, but they still look nice. So I think that was mine, I think, overall, specifically in that showcase.
Yeah, no, completely agree. In chat, tell us what you think your game of that particular event was. Luke, what was yours?
I think I probably agree with Michael, actually, in that it was Demon's Souls. So for me, love Demon's Souls, love Souls games in general, but Demon's Souls is quite a special game. When they did the original trailer, for me, I was really hyped up by the remake, just because Blue Point, in terms of what they do technically with their games, are just incredible. If you play Shadow of the Colossus, that's an incredible looking game. And so when they released the original trailer, I thought it looked spectacular, but obviously it didn't really have any kind of main extended gameplay look. And so when they actually showed the gameplay properly and had a run through right up to the Vanguard boss, I was just completely blown away by it. I think it's probably one of the most quote unquote next gen games that's been revealed, in terms of gameplay sequence. Just the lighting, the level of detail, the animation. Vanguard in particular, the boss is just incredible, just absolutely incredible. And to see that realized at that detail, and especially if you go back and have a look at that fight in the original Demon's Souls, it's really impressive. And I think for me, I can see some people have a look at the remake and they're a bit hesitant if they're huge Demon's Souls fans, because Demon's Souls has a very particular atmosphere, probably more than any other Souls game. It has a very particular atmosphere, and part of that was to do with how the game's color graded, etc., and how it looked way back then. But I think Blue Point have done an incredible job of kind of retaining that as much as possible, while also updating it for next gen. And it seems to me it's as if this is the kind of game From would have made back in the day if they'd had that capability at the time, which they didn't. But yeah, I was blown away by that.
Yeah, and again, when I saw the graphical fidelity of that, it really knocked my socks off, if I'm honest, like I say, with the VODs that were uploaded afterwards. But I'm quite pleased, actually, because none of you guys have said the one that kind of really triggered me, and it's one that's probably a little bit out there, to be honest, and it wasn't necessarily from its sort of graphical fidelity, but I just loved the looks of Deathloop. I thought that looked really interesting, and a game that I'm probably going to get into. I was never a massive Dishonored fan. That's the weird thing, and it's obviously by Arcane Studios, but I just love the sort of the graphical style and the music and the art sort of direction that they've taken that game with. So yeah, I really like the look of that. So that's the one that I've probably got my eye on. But that's not to say that my eye isn't on all of the others. Puxley, what's the chat been saying? Just quickly, what have we got in the chat?
Well, a lot of people, I think, agreeing with what we're saying. A lot of people look like they are looking forward to Dark Souls, and a lot of people are also saying, sorry, Demon Souls, I should say.
Demon's Souls, yeah.
Demon's Souls, yeah, sorry. And a lot of people also saying that they were pleasantly surprised with the Hogwarts reveal as well, and that that we don't really know anything about it, and that kind of makes it a bit more interesting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that was a bit of a surprise, I think, for everyone. And yeah, still no. What's the game I'm thinking of? Oh, Puxley, the Ring, Elden Ring. Still no Elden Ring.
Yeah, that's kind of we had a bit of a teaser last year E3, didn't we? And not really seen much about it since.
I was hoping that we might start seeing that again, but okay. Well, let's get into the real meat of this topic then. Let's talk about price, because we can't really go much further without discussing Sony's price points and how it stacks up against Microsoft and stuff. And Luke, I'll probably come to you first, mate, if you don't mind. So we know the price of the consoles now. I think they are possibly a lot cheaper than some were expecting, thankfully. Obviously, given the specs of these things. Do you think that perhaps the pricing of the PS5 was forced upon by the Microsoft reveal, particularly with the Series S? Or do you think this particular pricing structure is what Sony had in mind from the very beginning?
I mean, I think if we take Sony's word for it, I think Jim Ryan said that this has always been the plan. I suspect they probably... probably believe Jim Ryan on that basis, purely because I'm sure they would have heard a long time ago that Microsoft were planning to release a much more affordable next gen console, and probably wanted to get as close to that as they could with their one console, discless version aside. So I think it's probably been on the cards for a while. I was quite surprised at how cheap the discless version was. That took me back, because in my own head, I probably thought, well, maybe $450. This is in pounds for me, $450, and then $400 for a discless version. So the fact that it came in lower than that was really surprising. Especially because we know that the actual cost of including a 4K Blu-ray drive is minimal. I'm sure Michael probably can touch on it more, but I suspect it's probably in the.
I think it's been announced about $20 to $30.
Very cheap. So surprising on that basis. Not surprising that they went for as low as possible. I mean, I think it's just a win for gamers, really, that it's come in so cheap, and that the competition from Microsoft has been enough to press Sony and think, actually we've got to come out and got to be quite aggressive with our pricing structures. Not to mention, kind of third party, second party deals that they're doing as well. So I was really pleased with it. And I think it's going to be it's going to help the PS5 sell very well. The first round of pre-orders, as chaotic as they were, show that the demand is exceptionally high for it. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, I'm also quite interested how many discless versions that they're going to be manufacturing, because from my experience, they were really scarce for pre-orders, so which I wouldn't have expected. So it's going to be interesting to see, and we'll see on Tuesday whether the same level of demand is there for Microsoft's consoles.
Yes, Tuesday. I mean, once Tuesday's gone, and then obviously, both of those sort of elements have happened, and like you say, it will be interesting to see who's kind of had the most interest out of both the big players. But so, Michael, let's come to you next. So, do you think this is Sony's plan all along? Because there was lots of rumours about, obviously, horrendous failure rates of their SoCs and all kinds of bad news stories leading up to this. And perhaps VJ will come to you after Michael, if that's okay, because I know you've possibly got a theory around this. But do you think the Series S rattled Sony a little bit, or do you think they were actually prepared for this from the very beginning?
I think they knew. The problem is that the Series S has been kind of a terrible secret for a very long time. So
Yeah.
I personally knew about the Series S and what it was back in November.
Right. Blimey. Last year.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'd spoken to a couple of developers, and it was mentioned that it was already on the cards in terms of documentation that had been shared around the family of consoles. It was already given to them in their SDK, XDK stuff that they'd started to kick off in terms of the next generation of consoles. So the problem with the industry is everyone knows what everyone else is doing up to a point. So they know their strategic plans, don't know their detailed plans. But I think this generation has been kind of the strangest, because it's been the one where I think people have been playing very clandestine and almost, double, triple jeopardy on each other by feinting and faking information. So I know that Sony have put out fake leaks. Sony have put out fake UI videos to see if people are leaking them. And I know Microsoft's done the same thing. So
that's interesting.
It's all become very, very delicate in terms of who knows what and who's leaking what, because I didn't want to repeat what happened last time, where I think pretty much everyone knew everything before it even actually got announced. Whereas this time it was right up to the end, very, very well unknown. I think a lot of people, suspected what was going to happen, and I think the price was kind of a given, as Luke just mentioned. I mean, the actual Blu-ray itself is very cheap. I did a video on it a couple months ago, and I did the pricing on these consoles, and because of the fact that it's all about business strategy and cost of sale is not the cost of the unit. Everything's about what it's going to cost in the next 6 months, what's going to cost in the next 12 months, next 18 months. So companies don't sell things knowing it's going to be cheaper later on, or they don't sell it on the price now. They sell it what it's going to be in 6-12 months time. And that's why they're doing, which I won't touch on, but the cost of games and all that is kind of understood and expected. And they're going to drive that revenue stream from PSN the same way as Xbox are doing with Game Pass, because that's guaranteed revenue, and the more people you've got on your ecosystem, the more effective it is for your cash register, effectively. So I think the cost of the consoles is the same as it's always been, subsidized. I think this time people just paid more attention to it than ever before.
Well, I've got a question for you. You may be one of the few people that actually know the answer to this, because, let's face it, the Series S was the worst kept secret. That's fine. We all knew that. And all of the graphics, all of the design was done. Microsoft had to keep this under wraps or behind closed doors for an incredible amount of time. But why do you think they left it so long to reveal it? Why didn't they do it not long after the Series X, do you think? What was the reason for holding on to this information?
I don't know, but it was definitely tactical. So I think it was to do with the fact that they didn't know how cheap Sony would go with the digital. Right. I think that's why. And on a personal opinion, I was the price I did. I kind of priced it twice. I priced it at $299 when I predicted the price without a disk drive, and $329, $349 with. I'm still surprised they didn't do it with a drive. Simply because the market that's going to buy that a lot are some of the third, it's not third world, but some of the lower level of countries that don't have access to good internet and don't have huge amounts of revenue and don't spend crazily like the UK does, Europe does, and America does on consumer items. They're really going to struggle with a completely digital item that doesn't have very good connection over in their country, downloading what is potentially going to be, games that are 60, 70 gig on average. So that's why I was surprised that they did a diskless version. But I think that was because the cost had to come in at $299. So I wouldn't be shocked to my very core to think that they had a disc version ready and they were going to pick one or the other. That's
a very interesting point. I've never really thought about it before. But yeah, it's an always online machine, isn't it? And it's the one thing that kind of put the nail in the coffin of the Xbox One back in 2013, to have that sort of always on online sort of capability. But obviously a diskless, an all digital version's nothing without being online, really, is it? That's a very good point.
No. But my Xbox were ahead of the game back then.
They were. Sure. And they took a bit of a kick in for it at the time. And I think Sony are very good. I think Sony are very good at, and we'll probably touch upon this later, I think Sony are very good at letting Microsoft take a kick in and then come along and do exact the same thing once it's all sort of calmed down a little bit. But VJ, what's your take on this then? So talk us through the pricing and where you think Sony pitched it and whether Microsoft influenced them in any way.
Well, I just want to put out a disclaimer that anything that I'm about to say is everything is influenced by Michael's videos. So if incorrect here, please DM him. So I think from Sony's perspective, and I would suggest any small or even like major corporation for that matter would have numerous strategies and scenarios and clear objectives laid out months, if not years, before investing into what I don't know what you can call them, best laid plans, perhaps. The 499.39 price point, I think, was inevitable. Some say only after Xbox showed their hand, and I can point to a few reasons as to why I believe Sony had already planned out like the PS5 pricing, and obviously taking into consideration what the PS4 pricing is going to be going forward. I mean, they're a Japanese company and they're very, very conservative, hence a 10 T-flop machine. I'm just getting there before any Sony fanboys get excited. So I didn't see Sony sort of pricing themselves in such a way to sort of self-inflict, I don't know what you can call it, a stutter in their business plan. You may say that Sony were forced into a 399 all digital price point since Sony don't have an answer to Game Pass. That's true to a degree, I would say. However, this was a known fact to Sony, right, already, and I think they pretty much already factored that in, right, especially with this new what was it, PlayStation Plus narrative, right, that they've come out with, but which I think was a point further down the line. But there are some factors to consider why they went to 399. First of all, it served them really well in terms of the PlayStation 4 and the success that brought them, right. The price point is also, I think, key for the volume of sales that they want to do longer term, and more importantly, the software tie ratio that they want to achieve, which I think right now is over 10 to 1, right? Digital is where Sony and Xbox see the future, and they're withdrawing from retail quicker than we think, right? In Japan already, Microsoft has pretty much no retail facings, and Sony don't really care. Right, and we know about GameStop closing another 450 stores.
Is that a choice of Microsoft, or is that because sort of Japanese retail's turned its back on Microsoft?
The problem in Asia with Microsoft is that even the Japan office only has 10 people there. Wow. It's a liaison office. They don't even have an officially appointed distributor. I mean, just to sort of just sidetrack just for a moment, just to give you an example, the original Xbox 360 sold 1.5 million units in Japan, and to give you an idea how far they've fallen and how distracted they were, or how uninterested they were, it might be a better word, on the Xbox One, that's only sold 125,000 units, right? Just to give you an idea where they're at in Asia. So just getting back to Sony. So for me, $50 was never going to be enough incentive to drop a physical disk-based machine for a digital one. And as Michael just alluded to, the digital machine for both Microsoft and Xbox is pretty much a virtual cash register. The economics, since going into the game industry, producing a console and launching it in 2013 for Xbox and Sony have changed to a massive degree. A large magnitude, right, of savings are being made right now in comparison to 7 years ago. So you've got reduced manufacturing costs via DADC, CD, which is Sony's Blu-ray and CD production plant, right? Which I think is in Europe. If you just take Europe, I think they're based in Austria, Spain, and I think the British one is actually being closed down or is closed. You've got massive reductions then by default in physical logistics and manpower, sales reps fees, because in America the states are so big. I don't think Sony or anyone, maybe not even Activision, have their own sales rep network throughout all the US states, right? And those fees are 2 to 3%. You've got retailer margins, which can, standard is 20, but by the time you add in MDF and all the other benefits to the larger retailers, that can easily exceed like 25 to 28 to even up to 30%. You've got returns, you've got the secondhand market, you've got, I mean, you're probably not going to see, you remember that famous Sony video from last gen where they were showing, I don't know if it was Yoshida and somebody else sharing a physical game between friends, right? You don't see anything like that this time around. And the biggest one being digital sales of full price games have gone up probably from 15 to 20% up to 70% from when I was publishing games. And Sony or Microsoft, they're both in the same boat in this way, are making, I think, around $27 on a $60 first party game. Sold digitally versus selling it through GameStop. So Sony and Xbox care about the install base, regardless of what Phil Spencer says, because first-party games, 10 to 1 software tie ratio, digital sales, lots of accessories, install base is definitely where the true profits lie, and specifically for Sony's business plan, I think, going forward. Until they see changes, and that they think that they need to make right to their current business plans. And at the moment, I think it's just business as usual for them.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very valid point, to be honest. And to be honest, as gamers with boots on the ground, as it were, it's easy to just get lost in the final price without actually seeing all of the company structure and all of the thought and detail that goes on behind the scenes. And I really enjoy all of that aspect, because it's actually what comes up with the final costing for these machines, and obviously how they square up to one another as well. Puxley, so what's your take on the prices? I mean, where do you think Sony sits? Do you think they've done enough? So given that the power narrative probably sits with Microsoft, and it's the same price as obviously the top tier PS5, do you think PlayStation 5 have priced these well?
In hindsight, yes, I do. Because I know when, before any one of us knew what these prices were, and we kept speculating what we think they could have been, at least from what we've talked about in the past and from what I've seen online as well, a lot of people were guesstimating that they believed that, due to the power of the PS5, it couldn't be anywhere below $500, £500, whatever. But now that we have seen the price, and obviously it's matched to the Series X, and when you actually look at the technical specs of each machine as well, you can see that they're actually very balanced and they're very similar. For example, both of them are running Zen 2 8-core CPUs. Their GPUs are a bit different. We've got 10.28 to 12 teraflops. They've both got custom RDNA 2 GPU architectures that they're using. Similar SSD storage, both custom NVMe. So looking at it from that side of things, from the technical background, I think it's quite easy to see that actually they have priced it at the perfect point. So, and making it the exact same price as the Series X as well, which is obviously the top competitor that are going against. They're pretty much leaving it to the consumer, I'd say, at this point, to say they're both the same price. They both basically do exactly the same thing. We've shown you the tech specs for each of these top tier machines. It's now up to you to pick the machine that you want to play any particular game on. But then this is where I think where the value of the games comes into play now, because we've had a lot of talk about the consoles themselves, the power of the machines, what we've seen graphically, what we can do, and the types of things we can achieve with new SSD technology built into these things, faster load times and all the rest of it. But now this is where the games come in. I think it's been mentioned a few times already between Michael and VJ, I believe, about the prices of games and how they're naturally going to go up. But then equally, I know you can't stop business due to the way the world is in, but at the same time, people are going to use that to talk about the prices of games now. Because I think Sony have said that PS5 games will now retail for $70, I believe. Mm-hmm. And this is, for me, this is where it kind of pulls back to the value of things like Game Pass, because for one monthly fee, you can get all of these first-party titles and a ever-growing number of third-party titles for what I'd consider to be a cheaper price overall. I mean, if I was to play 2 games via Game Pass, I've then saved money that it would have cost me through buying games on the PlayStation. And I believe there's been an article that Jim Ryan has put out recently as well, saying that a subscription model doesn't work for their business, which is perfectly fine. It's perfectly reasonable. If they don't believe a subscription model works for them, they're completely in the right to do so. But it does make me question why they think that, because, as a consumer or someone who's used Game Pass for just over a year now, I can 100% see its value, especially with things like EA Play coming into the mix now for no extra added cost to the consumer. It's so many more big third-party titles coming into the roster for that same price point. So I don't know why Sony wouldn't have considered this. So I'm not quite sure. So in terms of the console price point, I think they've done it perfectly, because it's a direct competition to the competitor. And to talk about the digital version as well, going for so I think there's been a lot of comments online saying that the only real difference between the digital and the non-digital PS5 is the disc drive. And in terms of like a commercial off-the-shelf Blu-ray drive, and you're not talking a £90 difference. At least that's the difference in the UK price. So a lot of people are questioning why it is a big difference. But I think as VJ and Michael have alluded to already, you're trying to get people onto the digital bandwagon, bring it onto a cheaper price point, so you can deliver your games for the digital storefront solely. And of course, these companies then taking a larger revenue overall, because you're not having to give a cut to the retailer. Yeah, it's interesting. I think they've done good. It's just now where the games sit now. I believe.
Okay, well, that brings us neatly onto the next point, and I'm coming to you, Michael, next, if that's all right. Before I do, I'm just going to quickly put a shout out to our guardians of the chat. They do need a special mention. We have Fun Speculation, Fugly, and Mr. Tushi. They are guarding the perimeter fence, and our chat is friendly and nice because we have people keeping an eye out for trolls and horrible comments and things like that. You know, I want this to be a safe and, you know, a good community for us to be within, and I don't want trolls and stuff spouting their rubbish. So I've got quite a tough stance on those, but thanks to those guys. So that's Fun Speculation, Mr. Tushi and Fugly. Like I say, guarding the perimeter fence, keeping all the ne'er-do-wells out. But so big up those. So Michael.
Yes.
Do you think Sony have actually increased the value of Game Pass on behalf of Microsoft? Because if they've just upped their first party titles to, well, basically upped it by $10. I know not all first party titles come in at the $70 price, depending on the size of the game and stuff. But have they just actively and done Microsoft a huge favor in, like I say, increasing the value of Game Pass? What do you think?
I think commercially and marketing, yeah, absolutely. It would be a good marketing point for somebody in Microsoft to pick up on it and go forward with that argument. The problem there will be that we already know, and I'm pretty sure that Sony won't be the only ones to put their prices up this generation, certainly at the start. So it's quite common to have an increase at the start of a generation for a few certain titles and then dropping back down. I don't see that happening this time. I see this staying as the consistent. And there's the whole very true argument that, you know, we're paying the same price, give or take, that we used to pay 20 years ago for much longer and bigger games. And that kind of brings it back to the point that was made a minute ago. Was it Puxley or Luke that was talking a moment ago around the Game Pass?
Puxley,
yeah. Sorry, Puxley. Sorry. So I think what Jim was alluding to in his argument in terms of why Game Pass doesn't work, it's because the Game Pass subscription model is diluted across everyone that's on the platform. So the mechanism they've got as a business is they take people's games on board, and then whoever downloads those games, they give them a cut of that percentage so that they're getting revenue the whole time it's on Game Pass. So it's guaranteed revenue depending on how often that game is downloaded and played. The problem with Sony is you can't underestimate how expensive their games are. And this is not, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people complaining about me being a Sony fanboy, but it's quite clear in terms of the production values of the first party Sony games that they are not cheap. There's no way on God's little earth they're cheap. And when I mean cheap, I mean even bigger games, like something like Call of Duty would probably be much cheaper over 2 years of a generation, into 2 years of a 2-cycle game, than one massive something like, you know, Last of Us Part 2 or God of War, because they use so much outsourcing. They use a lot of third parties. They use a lot of companies to do materials, animation routines, videos. They really go out for this whole, and they're really pushing it again this generation. So I think their aim is not, they're trying to diversify from what Microsoft and PC do. And the only way that they can exist is what Nintendo's done. But I think Sony have taken the route of becoming the Hollywood of video games. The logo they've done now very much reminds me of the Marvel Universe logo, with the Sony logo, the PlayStation logo passing past with all these games in the background. And I think they're going to push that IP to try and claw back a lot of that revenue. And that's what they're doing early on in the generation. So they are going to put prices up. It will make Xbox more attractive. It will make PC more attractive, I think, because the pricing there will be $10, maybe even £10-15 cheaper to buy on these third-party titles or first-party that are going to go on PC and Xbox as well. So it is a very tough push for Sony, because they've got to really show the quality. But I think anyone can understand that they've got that history behind them. They just need to be consistent more than ever. In the early couple of years of the PS5, they can't afford to have duds if they're charging people £70 a game. So I wouldn't call it a dud, but I think Days Gone was a great game, but I don't think it hit quite the beat that they wanted in terms of impact on the market and sales. And I think that's the risk they take with the amount of diversity they have in their catalog. They allow teams to make games that probably wouldn't get greenlit elsewhere with bigger companies like EA or Activision. So it's good that they still exist, but they do need to spend a lot of time in the next year or so making sure, and I'm sure they have, that they've got a portfolio that makes the PS5 almost, unquestionable. You have to have it with your other console. And some of us are lucky, we can have multiple consoles, and that's always a benefit, but other people can't. So Sony really are going to compete against I've got to make a game that's £70 that you cannot live without, versus I can pay £10 a month and play 100 and 200 titles and pick and choose what I want. And that's a very tough battle, I think, for Sony.
I think it's a huge risk, and I absolutely take your point. And I'm coming to you next, VJ, if you don't mind, and we'll run with that same theme, because I do take your point, Michael. Sony have some vastly, fantastic IPs and franchises out there, and we've discussed on the show previously that when they give a Naughty Dog, or when Naughty Dog sort of pitches to Sony, and Sony green light something, I think Sony can kind of sit back and feel relatively comfortable that Naughty Dog and Insomniac are going to churn out some pretty top tier game. Microsoft have still yet to prove themselves with a lot of their studios. A lot of them are new acquisitions and still yet actually to put out any software for Microsoft solely. So do you think, are Microsoft so far behind that they can't fend off the first-party titles from Sony in a sort of a one-to-one showdown, which again makes Game Pass, even better value? Or do you think, like Michael said, that Sony's IPs are so cherished and valuable that they can actually hold a $70 price tag and people will still love and buy it?
Just to answer the studio thing, this is the way I see the studios is. Sony have been at this for far, far longer, right? Their studios have been together, 15, 20 years, and I think they're far more cohesively structured. I think with Herman Hulst coming in really defines that, because he's been on both sides of the equation, pitching to Sony for funding for a game for his studio, and being on the inside in understanding what the quality benchmarks are for first-party titles. Right, he's been through all of that. I think that they have more of a hive mentality and they work more as a team because they just had time to mature. And I think when I look at Microsoft, it's a bit like Man City. Well, I think probably Brighton, because what they've done is that they've gone out and bought a load of studios, and any one of them is potential. Sorry.
I could see where you were going with that one then.
Yeah.
Sorry,
it's just me, isn't it, on my own? Thanks, Michael, for popping in. So what I see is that with Microsoft Studios, any one of them, could they sort of perform a moment of brilliance? Yes, they probably can, but they just haven't matured together. They're all still working in silos, and I think that's the fundamental difference at the moment, right? And if Game Pass was going to be all that and a cup of tea, I think that Microsoft would have gone out and bought bigger studios rather than some of the ones that they have done. And it kind of shows you that they want to have a broader playground buffet of digital games that you can go and play. And I've no issues with that, right? Because they span across all different genres for all different makeup of people. And hopefully they're going to have more IPs that span the globe, right? Especially given their xCloud initiative. But so I'll just park that for the moment. Just to go back to, like, in terms of the game prices and everything, I've got a similar to Michael, but slightly different, which I think it might be a valid point. I don't know, but I'll see what happens after I say this. So besides the investment Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft are putting into making a console, I'm sure that given the advancements in these games and the sizes of games and what we're going to see in 3 or 4 years' time, I'm sure that every studio has had to somewhat overhaul their IT infrastructures and console development environments to accommodate these new systems. I don't know, but I'm just assuming the kind of stuff that all this little stuff that has to get done and adds up. That means more powerful PCs, larger bacon sandwiches, bigger pots of tea, and a fridge, and a larger fridge of ice cold Kit Kats. So tearing down engines and rebuilding them is a massive investment. And again, if anyone's got any issues with this, speak to Michael. This is a massive investment of resources. I recommend, if anybody hasn't watched the Raising Kratos documentary, because I learned and acknowledged a lot from it. For personal, I watched it a couple of times. However, none of the games that I have seen so far deserve the $70 price point in my eyes. Let's just put it that way, right? Because for me, they seem to be made on a baseline PS4 engine, as far as I can tell, with bells and whistles added. However, if Sony were going to increase the price point of their games, they needed to do it now to avoid a bigger PR storm later down the road, right? Get it out of the way, take the hit, and move forward, right? So it's not so much about the games releasing now, it's more about what's coming further down the pipeline. First party games can cost more to make. We know that, right? And who knows what Santa Monica or Naughty Dog are going to do, right, in order to push the boundaries in terms of the products that they make, right? And they very may well justify $70 in terms of what Microsoft are showcasing us, right? We know they've got Fable, we know they've got Avowed, but I can't see beyond those two at the moment, right? And maybe what the coalition are doing, right? Which again we don't know. What I will say for now is that should be seeing a range of pricing for first-party games, depending on what the game is, right? For me, I play a lot of golf games, so I'll play everybody's golf. So let's just take that example. Am I going to be charged $70 for that? Because I ain't going to pay that, right?
No, Sony have. I think the Little Planet Sackboy. I mean, there is a variation in prices depending on their size. I even think Miles Morales is slightly cheaper, isn't it? I believe.
I think we've got the same problem this gen, though, right? Because there's many games that are $60 that are not worth it, right? Resident Evil 3 being a prime example. Other titles that have come out like Zelda, Dragon Quest, Persona 5 that give me 100 hours or 200 hours of engagement. I would have happily have paid $80 or $100 for those games versus maybe my perception of Yoshi's Island, which I love Yoshi. I love the Nintendo brands. I love enjoying them. And I paid $60 for it. And for me, it's done in 8 hours. It's only really worth to me $30 to $40 max. So we've got this issue now. I put out a tweet back in June when everyone was complaining, oh, game prices are going to go up and this is happening and that's happening. But our Japanese gaming cousins have been paying $45 to $85 for a game since the PlayStation 2 era, depending on the game, depending if it was Japan only, because developers and everybody are making it for a specific segment, a specific genre, games like Captain Tsubasa and so on and so forth, right? So as an example, recent releases in Japan for Ghost of Tsushima when it came out was $71. Call of Duty, is it Cold War you guys are playing? I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah.
That's $83, right? And PS4 games have ranged between $45 to $95. And I think at the end of the day, as an individual, you just got to sort of ask the question: does one size fit all? And I don't think it does. But does it make Game Pass more valuable? It all depends on your situation and gaming habits. If you want to sort of move over to a digital playground of a buffet of games, then so be it. And they contain some decent first-party games and a varied quality of sort of rotating in and out third-party games, right? Game Pass in its own right is not the finished article. It's definitely missing God of War and a Spider-Man comparable titles, right? Or anything that's sort of in the realms of a cutting-edge experience. I know they've had Red Dead Redemption, but it's come in and gone out, right? This is why Sony, and I'm just sort of tack on to back of Michael's comment, need to make sure that they triple down on first-party titles that they're producing in terms of creativity and bringing at the forefront sort of like, I don't know how to put it, explosive new experiences, right, that blow the public away. Because Playground Games is one studio that I see in the Xbox stable of teams that can produce something that will definitely elevate Game Pass.
Yep. Right
now, Game Pass for me is akin to Microsoft Office minus Word and Outlook and maybe even PowerPoint.
What an analogy that was.
Yeah.
Amazing. I like it.
I don't know if Playground Games would be so welcome about that, but are they working on a Horizon title at all, or are they completely working on the new Fable title? Do we know?
No, they have two teams.
They do. So there is a Horizon, Forza Horizon in the works then, because that's not been announced whatsoever. And do we think that's sooner than Fable? I'm guessing it is.
Probably. I mean, Fable's a weird game because they have been working on that for a while, a couple of years. However, they've been constantly scaling up their dev team for that, moved into new premises for it as well. Yeah. So I suspect it's probably quite ambitious, and given we only got a CG teaser after a couple of years of development, suggests to me it's probably quite a while away.
I'm guessing they didn't want to steal Forza Motorsport's thunder as well, because that's obviously due before any Horizon game, I'm guessing. But well, while you're talking then, Luke, let's come to you next, and we're going to slightly change tack. So obviously after the event, it became clear that actually not all of the titles that were thought or assumed to have been PS5 only titles are. They are actually coming to the PS4 as well, which obviously means Sony is spanning the generations, despite on the sort of the take on Jim Ryan's statement at the time. So as far as I'm aware, Miles Morales is coming to PS4, which was not a massive shock to me. I always thought Miles Morales probably started life as a PS4 DLC, and then that was actually pushed out and extended to become a sort of a PS5 sort of title. Sackboy's coming to PS4, but the surprise for me was Horizon Forbidden West, and it was probably a surprise because I always thought it was a little bit further out. But and this is a sort of a Microsoft thing, isn't it? This is actually probably good news, but it's being sort of made to look like Jim Ryan outright lied. And to a certain degree, when you read the whole article that Jim Ryan mentioned, he was actually talking about still having to support the 110 million PS4 players out there and stuff. So I'm not sure he outright lied, but I would also suggest that when he was speaking about generations, he was probably comparing that to Microsoft's stance at the time, which was obviously we support and span generations. And so I think, the gaming media at large and lots of fans and stuff took it that actually Sony are going to shut the door on PS4 and just concentrate on PS5, and that's the reason everyone gets to upgrade. And also in the Sony June event, Puxley and I did a live reaction video, and it was very black and white that this title is for PS4, this title is for PS5. There was no mention whatsoever of cross generations. So a little bit like we alluded to earlier, do you think Sony sort of always had this in their back pocket, and before they had a chance to announce it, Microsoft already had, and then was taking all of the flack, and Sony sort of slinked back into the sort of shadows and waited for Microsoft to take all of that particular heat before they came out with their own sort of version of it? Was that the plan all along, do you think?
I think so. Well, I don't know actually. I think the thing with Sony is that at least in the original event, it's a PlayStation 5 showcase. It's all about the PlayStation 5, and this was the same for this event. So it's they wanted to focus on the PS5 versions of those games. There's no doubt, obviously, that Miles Morales in particular, and probably Horizon Forbidden West, were all made with a PlayStation 4 in mind. I mean, Forbidden West released at the beginning of near the beginning of 2017. Yeah. So there's absolutely no way that they didn't consider a PlayStation 4 version and start developing around that. Because
so why don't you think they came out and was honest from the beginning? Why the "we believe in generations" statement then, do you think?
I think you're probably right in that they wanted to get out ahead of or right behind Microsoft, when Microsoft's very clear cross-gen message, and make themselves look a little better than that. They have games that are coming that are clearly just for PlayStation 5, like Ratchet, for example, possibly Demon's Souls. They might turn around and say there's a PlayStation 4 version as well. But I think it's just Sony being quite clever about when they want to talk about these things, and the nature of those announcements of Horizon and Spider-Man as PS4 games in of itself was very kind of, oh yeah, we'll just tell you about this in a post, rather than get right up front and talk to people about it. So I think as you say, it's probably just Sony looking to get some goodwill up front, and then kind of coyly put in something that might be negatively received at the back end. For me, I don't think it particularly matters. We always have cross-generational games, every single generation, particularly the last couple. And it doesn't. When Miles Morales looks as good as it does it matter? Not really. When Horizon, assuming it lives up to the initial trailer, does it matter? No. And it's always, to me, made more sense that Sony would kind of espouse the cross-generational element, support of the PlayStation 4 than Microsoft, because Microsoft have a much smaller install base. So for Sony, it's going to be not difficult, but it's more of a thing to leave that generation behind, because they have a huge install base. Whereas it always surprised me that Microsoft took that approach, because the Xbox One generation has not been good for them. Apart from the back end where they've Game Pass, etc., really good value. it's not been a good one. And I always thought they'd try and get as far away from that as possible. But on the other hand, it's very pro-consumer. So, and that's the direction they want to go in, because, that's the avenue that they think that they can really have a lot of goodwill, get people to their platform. So it's interesting.
It is interesting. Pux, what's going on in the chat at the moment?
A lot of people kind of agreeing, and a small bit of to and fro between the Sony narrative at the moment, between the PS4 support. I've seen a comment here from Dragon Wolf. Thanks for tuning in, saying that I think your initial comments for that. He says, I think you're being generous, as they defo deceived the fans, even stealth dropped the info after the event.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Okay, I'll take your point on that one, Dragon Wolf, because it wasn't perhaps not so much the actual information itself. It's probably how they sort of stealth dropped it after the event. And I'm guessing they were never... So this is the weird thing. To me, this should be kind of a good news story. And I know Microsoft find themselves in this situation, sort of good news stories kind of turned on its head and stuff. But this should be a good news story because, like I say, at this moment in time, there's 110 million PS4 owners out there, and there's absolutely zero PS5 owners out there. So there should be 110 sort of million happy-ish sort of people. I know people want the generations to move forward, and perhaps I'll come to you next, Michael, if that's all right.
Before you do move on, just to quickly add on to those comments as well, if you don't mind.
Go on.
Because Dragon Wolf did actually agree with another comment, which kind of, I think, cements the back and forth between. I think we all kind of agree and disagree of both sides, which I think makes it interesting to discuss. So a comment here from Fastback OG NLG podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. So they say just makes sense financially to support PS4 with many millions more than those who will have a PS5 at launch. Production issues also played a part thanks to 2020, which is also very true. It's the other side of the coin, right? So yes, we're not completely crossing that cross-generational gap, but at the same time, to support the PS4 does mean more revenue and money for Sony. So it does kind of make sense, but equally I can see why people might be a bit miffed that they have, quote unquote, gone back on their word.
Okay, well, to round this first topic off, then let's come to you then, Michael. I mean, what's your take on this? I mean, I guess in my heart of hearts, I always kind of knew they were going to have to support the PS4. They could never really just shut the door and turn their back on them. I don't think that was ever likely to happen. I just don't understand the sort of the messaging out of the event. Even when we come down to the pre-order sort of debacle, it was all a little bit sort of. Didn't seem very well organised or ordered. It all seemed to just sort of blurt out at the end, didn't it? What's your take on it?
Well, I mean, in terms of the cross-gen titles, it was always known. I mean, I think on the original reveal, I said that I'll be surprised if Horizon is not on PS4, and that was months ago. Because, as you've just both said quite rightly, you can't ignore 110 million people, and you're not going to, and that's going to grow. That's the other thing, that the PS4 will grow. It will probably reach 150, 120 million people. So there is going to be games on that console for the next year to 2 years, I believe. I think Jim Ryan said the next 4 years. I think he's being very generous in that to keep sales going, but certainly in certain countries it will be. But that all makes sense. And I think that getting angry about having cross-generation titles just misses the point, because, I mean, the PS4, that had, 7 launch titles, of which only 3 were exclusive. The rest of them were cross-generation. So there was Killzone, Killzone, Resogun, and Knack. And everyone knows that Knack was the game of the generation. So that's kind of a given, that we've now got the same situation again, where you've got Demon's Souls. Is the Little Big Planet one? Is that cross generation? That's exclusive, isn't it? Or is that
No, it's cross generation. Sackboy.
Sackboy. There's that Crash.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, it's Horizon Forbidden West, Miles Morales, Sackboy. Is there any others? Perhaps the chat can tell us.
No, I think it's just those 3 that confirmed so far. Yeah.
So it's almost the same situation as the PS4. I think what the biggest problem nowadays, I think, is a lot of companies are falling into the social media bubble, as I call it, in the sense of they feel as if you have to get one up. And I think if you go back to the management structure in terms of companies, that was a very different time in 2013. But they did the same thing. You just alluded to it now with the conversation about when Microsoft did the no used games, Sony jumped on board with this. Here's how you play used games on the PS4. It was funny. It was witty. It was right at the time. But they're in the situation now where Microsoft should have done a similar thing. and done a generational gag, and that's
Yeah,
where
you know what? I'm pleased you said that. I was thinking that because Microsoft could do a 30-second video saying this is how you play backwards compatible games, and they stick an OG disc in a Xbox Series X, and it works. And like you say, that's the sort of shot back, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's if that's the marketing game, and if it's friendly and it's jivey. I mean, we're all old enough to remember the old Sega days, and then Sega and Nintendo went hell for leather, and Sega were well known for their kind of aggressive marketing in terms of what they used to do all the time. So it's, I mean, didn't Sega put an advert in front of the Sony offices in London when they launched the Dreamcast? I'm sure they did. So it's a more civilized environment now for advertising, but I don't think anyone picks up on the fact that they could market themselves better. And I think Sony, bringing it back to them, my point was Sony were almost afraid to kind of revert on what they'd said. They saw Microsoft had gone about, everyone comes with us, the generations don't matter anymore, we're just going to keep making Xbox One games. And everyone knows that's not realistic. Microsoft knows that's not realistic. That's just a marketing slogan. But I think what Sony should have done is just let them have that moment. Instead, they came back with a generation comment. And I think somebody somewhere would have gone, maybe we shouldn't have said that, because we've got to tell you about these PS4 games that are coming as well. And they almost got afraid. They're a victim of their own comment there. They've kind of said it first and then gone, oh, actually, we've got to come out and say it. And I think the worst thing you can do with bad news is do what they did, which is not say it. And I think just on another subject, the whole pre-order thing was another bit of a disaster. They shouldn't have done it the way they did it. Now, they might have had a reason to stop bots, to give people the time to jump on the sites and snatch all the PS5s and scalp them, because the PS5 and the Series X would be the big ticket scalping items, much more than the 3080 was, although that didn't really exist. And I've got a story to tell on that that's frustrated the hell out of me. But it's funny that they didn't kind of give people a heads up when they told them they were going to give them a heads up. And I think what we've seen this year is every company has dropped the ball in marketing over and over again. And I really don't know why. I can only say that, bringing it back to something that Vijay said earlier, Sony studios are very good at working collectively as a unit. And I've said this before, they share resources, skills, technology, everything. That's how they make the games they make. But when people got forced to not work in an office, you have to be very good at managing teams virtually. And I do that a lot. And it's very hard when you haven't done that to keep that momentum and that conversation going, when you're not standing around the coffee machine having a chat with John about something else that's going on. All that's gone at the moment. Yeah. And I think that's really affected the marketing teams. And I think that's been evident this year with a lot of balls dropped from both sides of the fence, which I think that's the biggest problem I think Sony have had at the moment, is they've not marketed themselves well. They've been too quiet for too long. And then they've almost said one thing and then done another. But if you read between the lines, it was all there. It just wasn't very clearly mentioned. I mean, I've seen information about the fact that no one knows about backwards compatibility, and the digital version doesn't play any PS4 titles, and it's all there on the blog. You can go on the website and look at it. Same as you can for the Series X. I read up on the Velocity architecture when it launched, and people were saying, this new Velocity architecture. And I'm like, did you not read the Xbox blog 2 months ago? It was on there then. It's not new information. So I think people are just used to being spoon-fed rather than reading things. And I think that's what these companies have missed this time. They've not been clear with their messaging. They've been a little bit chaotic.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to me, it always felt like they were kind of in a mosh pit, and they had a sort of a dagger each, and they were kind of dancing around each other, waiting for the other one to make the first move. And I think Sony are very good at that. They do sort of sometimes hold back and wait for Microsoft to make the first move, or make a mistake perhaps, and then capitalize on it. And Microsoft this time, I think they've clocked Sony's game, and they thought, no, we'll hold back a little bit then, and that's why perhaps they were holding off on the Series S information and just sort of calling Sony's bluff on the who's going to blink first kind of narrative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, gents, I absolutely appreciate that. I mean, this kind of rounds up our first topic, I'm afraid. And just as an interlude, a big shout out to the chat. We've had 33 people, I think, at the maximum watching. We've got 31 people at the moment. Thanks to everyone. Great to see everyone in the chat. Good chat going on. And like I say, we've got our moderators keeping everything safe, but it all looks good and friendly at the moment, so that's always a good thing. So, Pucks, I'm going to come to you first. And I'm coming to you from the angle of I think you would probably admit yourself, you prefer Xbox to game on Xbox because of kind of where your friends and stuff are. Although currently you game on a PC using the Xbox brand and you own a PS4. So you kind of span all three. So who's going to get your cash come November? I mean, are you going to upgrade your GPU? Is this going to be a Sony win? Is this going to be a Microsoft? Who's done it enough for you to actually, get you to spend your hard-earned cash?
Well, for me, I've very recently upgraded to Game Pass Ultimate so that I can dive into cloud gaming, which I think runs very well for how kind of still early days it is after the beta.
Mhm.
But I've kind of at a point now where I feel I'm invested enough into Game Pass and that ecosystem on PC that to go to a Series X or an S is almost a no-brainer. And I probably would lean towards a Series X, not just because it's the more powerful machine, but I know the world still wants to go all digital and that it's super convenient and reliable to just download and play the games that you want. But I'm still not convinced that game file sizes followed by now internal non-changeable SSDs in these new systems. I don't feel that the capacity of storage media to date is catching up or improving as fast as what game file sizes are. So that's one of the main reasons I much prefer to have a disk drive so that I can just buy a disk to basically be my install medium as opposed to having to constantly install games on the system. I mean, when it comes to PC, I mean, naturally, of course, I don't have a CD drive in my PC anymore. It's all downloaded through Steam or the Epic Store or whatever, or the Xbox app on PC. So I'm very used to downloading it, and I very much hate having to wait a long period of time to be able to play some games. So short answer is I think Xbox is where my money is going come November.
Okay, well, Luke, I'll come to you next because I think you're in a very similar situation to Puxley, aren't you? I think you predominantly sort of game on PC, but you do dabble on Xbox and PlayStation and stuff. So, and you've actually disclosed that you've managed to secure yourself a 3080. So, is that enough for you, or do you get the next generation consoles as well? Who's tipped the balance in your favour?
I mean, for me, I'll get everything. So, so that, just because I think if you're able to, and like I'm an enthusiast of this hobby, and they all have something to offer. That's just kind of how I've always tried to. If I've had the means, so yeah, for me, I managed to get a PS5 pre-order as well. Which is like the holy grail of 2 pre-orders. I'm not sure what actual, the actual odds would have been, but I was one of the lucky few. So
just out of interest, did you go all digital or the disc version?
Well, I actually I went for the disc version, but only out of necessity because the discless version seems so scarce.
Right.
That I thought, if I have to wait for this to go up at retailers, by the time it probably does, the other version's gone, and I'd rather just get a console out of the first pre-order batch. So I went for the disc drive, but I'm also very, very fortunate that I live somewhere where we don't have VAT. So when I get stuff imported, that's taken off. So so I got the disc version for about the same price as a discless one. But anyway, I'll be getting all of them, and I'm excited by all of them. I mean, I think if you were asking, you were going to ask me today which one, when you get it fired up, out of all three, will you kind of be the most excited about? Right now, it's the PlayStation 5, just because I love Demon Souls, I love Spider-Man, and they're coming right at launch, right? So for me, that's where it is. Although I will be excited to try the Series X as well, because I think it's an exceptional piece of hardware. But I think they've all done good things to try and get people's money, and I think and this kind of circles back to the earlier discussion as well. But when people were talking about value and Game Pass, etc., I think it's important, and this applies for something like a new GPU, etc., which is obviously a lot of money for a component compared to a single console. But value is entirely perceived value to a consumer, right? So what is value to me may not be value to someone else, and I think both consoles and the new GPUs from NVIDIA and probably Big Navi when it's finally revealed by AMD. they'll all hold some value with someone. It just depends on your needs. And I think they've all done a good job of showing, even Sony, even with their game prices, right? Because the value of Demon Souls to me for £70 is far greater than many Game Pass titles. So it's good value for me. It's better value for me to be invested in that because I'll get more out of it rather than having although I do have a Game Pass subscription, I think it's great. So, I think they've all done good stuff, and it's going to be interesting to see kind of what people plump for, particularly in the console space. What kind of sales Microsoft and Sony achieve in the first 6 months.
Well, I'm coming to you next, VJ. And I'm pleased you brought up value, Luke, and we'll obviously come to you afterwards, Michael, but I'm guessing that you probably get all of them because that's kind of what you do on your channel anyway, but we'll cover that perhaps when we come to you. VJ, Luke's mentioned a good point. For him, it's not really about a power narrative at all. It is purely about the game. So the fact that the Xbox is 12 teraflops and the PS5 isn't, doesn't really come into his decision about which one he's excited for. It comes down to the software. So I've got kind of two questions for you. Which of the companies have probably done enough to sway you into sort of making sure you absolutely get a day one purchase? And secondly, 2-point question, talking of value, do you think it is a higher value proposition for Xbox gamers to move over to PlayStation or for PlayStation guys to move over to Xbox, assuming that they were going to move from one to the other? Because I'm thinking, and I take Michael's point that the games even at $70 is the value of those is so high because they are such an intrinsic part of PlayStation that they're actually worth it. But is there going to be many Sony guys over there thinking actually the value proposition of Xbox is just too tempting to ignore this time round?
There's quite a few questions there, and
sorry, pick at them as you will.
Yeah, my brain's split into 16, and they're all talking at once now. Trying to get them all to shut up so I can just focus on one answer.
Which one are you going to get first? Which one's swayed you enough?
See, I have to agree with Luke on one fundamental point. Tech is fundamentally a distraction. It's all about how games engage you and the community around you, right? And I think that's the fun. It's humanity that's important here, not technology, right? And how we incorporate that into our daily lives, right? To come together. So anyway, I'll put that stuff aside. Microsoft is basically, the way I see it, is gambling on a cheaper machine in the Series S. Plus, I don't know if you buy it. Obviously, if you buy it through the All Access program, you're going to get 24 months of is it Game Pass Ultimate, right? But if you're going to buy it off the shelf at $299, you're going to get, I don't know what they're bundling it with, or if at all, but let's assume it's 3 months of Game Pass, whatever they end up packing in. And basically, for me, that's that $299 price point is a way to hook you in and hope that's enough for your generational loyalty, right? And Sony have the initiative of offering classic games like the PS1, PS2, PS3, if it's not back compatible, via free or very cheap download, and then go to the classic marketing technique of future promise, right, which they're known for. And this is why I think like games like Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Persona 5 Royale, all games that I've played and I enjoy it and I like those genres. So for me personally, I understand it's completely subjective, but for me it's been a godsend. And the reason I'm saying that, because those are so important at the end of a generation. Sony can point to and consistently point to, and over decades, increase quality over lifespan, right? And Xbox don't really improve as much over time. That's, I think, the fundamental thing that's sitting in everybody's subconsciousness, but they can't quite grasp it all. And then you get all this fanboy nonsense on Twitter, which I know Michael loves. Given only PlayStation 4 games are compatible with the PlayStation 5, and the aforementioned offering older generation games much cheaper. So Sony, what they've done is obviously countered Game Pass in terms of instead of just offering PS2, PS3 games at $199 or $299 each, which I would have done, or make them all free via PlayStation Now. And remember, PlayStation Now only has 2 million subscribers, so they could have easily packed in PlayStation, and they may still do. I don't know what their plans are, right, by territory, and pack that in as well. However, they've made some of the most popular PlayStation 4 games available via relatively cheap subscription service, which is PlayStation Plus. I pay $2.50 a month. I know everyone's going to say it's $60, it's £60, it's $5 a month, but it's always consistently on sale 50% off every June, right? Okay. Plus, you receive 2 really decent games every month, as long as you stay subscribed, obviously. And I don't find that with Game Pass Ultimate. I think the games that they offer on a monthly basis are, for me, okay, whatever, right? It's not quite Game Pass, but I find it to be incredible value for me. And the point that you're making about transitioning and people sort of switching machines and stuff like that, for me, that is an exceptional transitional tool as well. It's an excellent point that you've made. But you could counter all of that, right? Saying that, well, hang on a minute, most PlayStation 4 gamers have already bought those. So what's the real value in it, really? Because everybody owns those games, right? Yeah. Or you can go and buy them secondhand. So an Xbox owners that haven't already got a PlayStation 5, if they decide to go the other way, can all of a sudden access all of these games for a relatively small monthly fee off the bat. And then the argument becomes on the Xbox guys say, hey, look, we can play God of War, all these other games that we can't have on Xbox. Is it worth jumping ship to the other side, right? Another for me is branding. These are some of Sony's, and I've already said, Sony's biggest brands, and will potentially have sequels. And keeping those brands in the public eye and synonymous with PlayStation is a very smart and clever strategy. And I know that we're sort of going into the minutiae or granular level of everything that like Sony are doing, but I think when you add it all up, there's a bigger picture there, right? The other is the fact that many PlayStation 4 gamers bought these games physical media. I did. And one of the biggest features for me on offer from next-gen consoles is the function and ability of being able to quickly switch between games and resume them like effortlessly. And play them like so wherever you've left off previously. I can't deny that this feature is enticing me, someone who likes to hoard games, to go all digital, and not having to sort of pay out money the second time around to play these games digitally and switch between them is really important for me, and I think it will be for a lot of PlayStation 5 owners. But finally, if these games are enhanced in any way or in several ways on the PlayStation 5 at no additional cost, then absolutely it's a great way to strengthen the transition between PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, right? However, the bigger transition tools are undoubtedly, Miles Morales and Horizon Zero Dawn 2, and probably God of War 2 as well, and whatever else they've got in store, but definitely not Final Fantasy 16.
Okay, yeah, you wasn't impressed with that, was you?
Look good. Look great.
Michael, so I'm going to fire a slightly different question at you. Sorry, but and it's an interesting one for me. It's basically, how do you think the platform holders are going to gauge success? I mean, I know lots of fans like to talk in terms of win-lose when it comes to sort of the console war, as it were, in inverted commas. But how do you think the platform holders themselves are going to gauge success? I mean, they're obviously competing against each other, but are they using each other's metrics as a sort of a platform to say, well, we're doing better than Microsoft or vice versa? Or do you just think they're absolutely competing against their own targets? How will success be measured in this coming generation? Because they're both doing very different things.
Well, they are, and they aren't. I think it all depends who you talk to in a company. So if you talk to marketing or business growth, then they'll have a view of what's important to them. And if you talk to the people that run companies, the executives and the finances, then it's all about revenue. It's all about GPs. It's nothing else but that. And I think that's clear in terms of everyone's going into this generation losing money. So Sony's profits are going to be down. They know this. The cost of sales is going to be down. The R&D return is going to have to come in the next 12 months. And Microsoft's got exactly the same problem. The difference is Microsoft have so many other revenue streams that they can openly talk about subjects that are different and less critical to them as a business. So they can speak about revenue streams in terms of what my GAS service is, who subscribed, how many people have got in line, what's my engagement like. And all of that is very valid and good marketing structures. The same as companies that stress on how much they use, for carbon reductions and how many items they've made. In fact, I think Microsoft did this on the Xbox. There was a certain amount that were carbon free because they replaced it by planting trees and stuff. So this is all good marketing, and it's all good for your brand. It's all good to promote positive PR. But I think fundamentally both companies will market it and look at the same thing. How many bums do I have on seat? That's it. And irrespective of what anyone says from the top of the range down, they don't care whether you buy the PS4, the PS5, the Series X, the Xbox One. Doesn't matter. Just matters what you buy and how you spend money with them. And if you're engaged, you're more likely to spend money. And I think that's what both teams do very well. They stay engaged with their audience. Microsoft do a very good hands-on. They have all these sessions in America, I know. And I think both companies probably focus a little too much on the American market. It's their biggest market by far, but I think they ignore or at least don't give the same amount of love to the wider area. Australia, New Zealand, all of Europe, and Brazil and places like that, which do spend a lot of money. And I think that they do need to address that, or they run the risk of doing what Nintendo did all those years ago by ignoring Europe. And if you're as old as me, I was around before any consoles hit the country. I was a computer boy, so Sega won over here and a lot of Europe because Nintendo just ignored it. And by the time they came around, it was too late. And
that was back then, right? The distributor back then.
Yes, yeah. And that can happen again. That could easily happen in parts of Europe if Microsoft don't give enough love to Europe. And this is one of the things that's happened now. Sony's, PlayStation's big in the UK and a lot of Europe because of the fact that I think some of the marketing that Xbox do is a little bit too orientated to the American market, whereas Sony have been good at trying to giving different messages to different areas and focusing on that. And I hope they don't miss that. But they've certainly started off with a view that everyone else, America gets it first, Japan gets it first, which is how it used to be. Japan always used to get it first, and then we get it a little later. And I've seen people moan about that online, and it's not a massive problem. It's 1 week. It's not, it wasn't that much last time, but they need to make sure that they don't do that over and over again. They've raised the prices of the games, but now the euro is more expensive than the dollar, and that's just crazy.
Yeah.
And that's a risk that both Xbox and Sony need to be aware of, because you can turn off your market quickly and lose quite a lot of revenue. So that's one area where I think they will be focusing. They'll be looking at individual regions and who's buying online, who's subscribing. And I think what VJ said around PS Now, it's PS Now and PSN is their Game Pass. And that's where I think they'll really go up against what Microsoft are doing now, which is giving extra value, VAS, to that service. So you've got xCloud and you've got the ability to play games online. PS Now has been around for years. It's a very good service. It's only going to grow this generation. And I think that's where backwards compatibility for older titles are going to sit. And I think that'll become part of PS Now. Subscribe and get all this back catalogue. And that's where Sony's strength lies. And I think that's the area they'll look to push in the next year or so to combat Game Pass. But it all comes down to who spends money, how often do they spend money, and how often are they engaged in giving them money. That's what they're going to look at. What they tell you in the marketing is all based on what looks best for them. That's the same for any company, though.
Yeah, I'd not really thought of sort of PlayStation Now as being a sort of a competitor to Game Pass. The only counter I would say to that is it's very backwards looking, as in sort of, these are the games that have been around and you can now play them. Whereas it feels like, Game Pass is kind of forward looking. So you get day and date first party titles and stuff. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out and how obviously the fans of each service kind of treat it. But yeah, I agree that, obviously Jim Ryan has said that there's no backwards compatibility for PS3, 2, and 1, but I'm guessing he's meaning at a hardware level, because surely they could software emulate backwards compatibility on those via PSN Now, couldn't they?
Well, yeah, and that's exactly where I think it was always going to go. That's what I got asked on another podcast, and I said the same thing then. That you've got to look at it from a business point of view. That there's no benefit in giving away your back cat for free on your new machine. Microsoft have done it because it was their differentiator. It was what made them stand out from the crowd. It's been their USP. Very much like Sony have made VR their USP for the PS4. Microsoft have made the backwards compatibility their USP. And I think that's great. And I think Sony have done the right thing by not trying to compete, because I don't think they will. Because I think you can't underestimate how much money and time and effort Microsoft have put into that. And I think it's an amazing piece of work. And I think it's a core element of what they're doing, almost bringing the PC market to console. And I think that's superb. Yeah. And I think Sony knew that, and they knew it would be a losing battle, so they've not done it. And what they've done is they've just stepped away from it completely, concentrating on giving backwards compatibility to PS4, which you've probably got to thank. That's one thing I will say that Microsoft have influenced Sony on, which is I don't think the PS4 being as back compat and boosted as it will be on the PS5 to PS4 would happen if Microsoft wasn't around. But that's why we all need competition. That's why even if you like Xbox or if you like Sony, you need both, because if you have one company dominating Nvidia, then you end up with bad quality or just bad service. Not anti-consumer, because people say that a lot and it's not correct. Charging people an extortionate amount of money isn't anti-consumer, it's business. It's whether or not you choose to pay it or they lie to you what they're giving you. That's what's anti-consumer. But that's why I like competition, because if you don't have it, you get complacency, and that's what happens all the time. And Sony did it, Microsoft have done it, every company does it. So I'll be looking forward to seeing just how much they compete over the next 12 months and how that helps us, the consumer, to get better value.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, PC gaming and console gaming's probably never been so close in terms of sort of sheer specs and stuff. And obviously with NVIDIA releasing the 3000 series RTX cards and obviously Big Navi coming along and obviously Series X and PlayStation 5, RDNA 2. It's all quite close this time around, isn't it? I don't think it's ever been quite so close in the past before, not from my memory anyway. Pux, what's going on in the chat? There's been quite a lot in the chat. I'm conscious we've missed quite a lot of what's been said in the chat.
Yeah, I've been kind of darting between listening in and reading as well. I think there's a lot of people that are effectively agreeing with what's been saying, if I'm perfectly honest, from what I could pick up.
You don't have to agree. You can disagree with us, guys.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the heart of all conversation, yeah.
Exactly.
But as you guys were talking, I did actually think of a question of my own. I think it might be interesting. So, because I think, Michael, did you also say that if you had to pick one, was your favourite a PS5?
If I had to pick one at the moment, yeah, it'd be a PS5, because I can already play everything that Xbox is going to give me on the series on the Xbox One X. So it's getting something I can't get. That's why I would buy a PS5. I love their content. I love their games. That's the one I would pick. But I won't pick one. I'm buying everything. So that's just. Sorry.
Yeah, go on. So a question I did have then, mainly for the three of you, and even yourself, Lad. But going towards a PS5, because we know that no matter whether you get the digital or the disc-based version, you're getting the exact same console, and in theory, that console should last you until the end of the current or the next generation's lifespan. Give it 5 to 7 years, right? Whereas on the Xbox side, of course, we've got a Series X, which is more powerful than the Series S, and we're currently told that the Series S will not impede on the future development of titles on what will become the current generation. Do you guys agree with that, or do you think, is your reasoning for the PS5 not just for the games, but have you also considered, or mainly thought about whether you think that actually, because I've only got one box to worry about, you can guarantee that your games will be the same quality no matter what? Whereas on Xbox side, do you reckon there might be a future deterioration in the quality because developers may have to consider getting the games to run on the less powerful machine in the new family of series? I don't know who wants to answer. It's kind of aimed at everyone, really. So
let's go with Luke first. Then let's go with Luke first on that one.
I mean, I think there's some argument to be had that if you buy a PlayStation, let's just talk about purely first-party games. If you buy a PlayStation 5, you know that those developers are only developing for one baseline spec, and that's PlayStation 5, and what that produces, we don't know yet. We don't know what that looks like longer term. We're only early in the generation. Well, it hasn't even technically started. So we don't know what games 2 or 3 years from now, first party, develops from the ground up, properly from the ground up for one system look like. So you could have that argument, I suppose, that if you're investing in a PS5, you don't have to worry about, will the Series S hold an Xbox Series X back in terms of, game design or something like that? And again, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows the answer to that. It's probably no is the answer, but we'll just have to wait and see. But I mean, for me, it doesn't. It depends. It depends on really the question. It's kind of predicated on the assumption that the person is only going to buy one of those things.
Yeah.
Because if you're buying them all, or buying a couple, you don't worry about that. I mean, it's just not. You wouldn't worry about it at all, because even if the Series S holds back the Xbox Series X from doing stuff, in a couple of years from now, well, if you have a PC that's more capable than either of those things, you don't worry about it, because they're all coming to that.
You say that though, Luke, and you are right. Obviously, if you're buying them all, then it is kind of a moot point. But I like to hear your reasoning behind the one that you do pick, if you see what I mean. And from what I've heard, everyone seems to be leaning towards PS5 because they think, well, I'm not saying that it's not true, but because it's going to come with games that you can't get on a PS4, and that's an interesting topic, because obviously, Xbox Series X has games like that, not necessarily first-party ones, but it obviously has the medium. And I've got to be honest, off the top of my head, I can't think of another that is Xbox Series X only. Perhaps the chat can help me out on there, and perhaps the medium isn't a big enough draw for people to think, Xbox Series X is their sort of primary console, as it were. But
there's also Scorn on the Xbox Series.
Scorn,
really, yeah.
We haven't really seen that since the July showcase, have we?
I know, but I'm a big HR Geiger fan. That game really intrigues me. Yeah.
So, sorry, Pucks, what was your question? Should we aim it at Michael then?
Yeah, it was mainly whether or not you believe. I mean, because you're going for all of you have said that if you had to pick one, you're going for PS5, regardless of whether you buy them all. I myself have said I'd probably go for the Xbox to start with because I'm heavily invested into it. However, that's not to say that I wouldn't want to get a PS5, because there are many titles PS5 exclusive which I'd love to play. But I suppose my question is, do you reckon that because PS5 being one platform, it's guaranteed that you're not going to be hindered in the quality of the games going into the years, whereas on the Xbox side of the fence, you've got a Series S, which is less powerful than the Series X. Currently, Microsoft has said that developers have even said, apparently, according to this as well, that the lower graphical fidelity and power of a Series S will not impede on the future games to come. Do you reckon that is true in the long term, or do you reckon that Xbox would suffer?
Who's that question for?
Let's point it towards you then, Michael. I mean, is having to he's having to support a previous generation actually a ball and chain for game development and possibly game design?
Can I go before Michael?
Yeah, go on. If Michael doesn't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because obviously I've been watching his videos. Yeah, so
go on.
In pole position.
Stop saying that now, VJ. It's gone.
Yeah, we've done that bit. Go on.
It's interesting what Puxley was saying, and for the mass market consumers, right? Spider-Man's coming out, right, in very short future, so they're going to be comparing Miles Morales on both PlayStation systems, right? And for them, I think for the mass market, I think consumers is going to be a wow moment, right? Akin to maybe not as much, but going from standard definition PS2 and Xbox visuals to HD visuals. Now, of course, it's all going to be subjective, right? But my point in regarding the announcement of God of War is something that needed to be done, right? But it was much needed, akin to the reveal of Fable, right, having to be announced on Series X. In my opinion, God of War is currently positioned to be Sony's big third quarter or maybe Christmas release 2021, setting up Spider-Man for probably 2022, right? So full capacity on that game probably wrapped up at the end of 2017. And then because God of War just came out subsequently, a few months later, or maybe even prior to that date. So is 4 years enough to rebuild all or just key aspects of the God of War engine and deliver a true next-gen 25-hour gaming experience, given that the game design, the mechanics to a degree are already in place? Is it enough time to rebuild the engine to push stuff like skin texturing, facial and skeletal animation, broken bones, better muscle deformation, flesh wounds, advanced scene complexities? Because what I'm seeing, that none of these games that are cross-gens that are coming out are supporting anything near what we saw in the Unreal Engine 5 demo, right, in terms of Nanite and Lumen, right? So for me personally, and obviously someone else can answer this better than me, this is a completely layman's perspective, but it's just been rattling around in my head. It's no, because even the Unreal Engine 5 is only releasing at the end of 2021, albeit it's the preview version is coming out early next year. And even if they're sort of letting it out in terms of preview or beta mode, Epic can only really support maybe a couple of really top games that they think that will showcase the engine in and around launch. I don't think they've got the capacity to support like 10 or 15 beta programs, right? So, and also Sony may have sold a maximum of, let's say, 25 or 35 million units by the end of next year. So will they want to keep the Series S at bay and retain PlayStation 4 gamers engaged and keep God of War on that system? But surely the God of War engine can't be advanced in time for a 2021 PlayStation exclusive, or can it? Right? And I want to say yes, since Sony and Epic have been working so tightly together all this while and taking into consideration the $250 million, I think it was, investment that they made. So Sony want to be first. And have to be first, in my opinion, to showcase the cutting edge of what games have to offer. And what better game to showcase that than God of War, right? This is the whole premise of their system, right? And what Ryan's been saying. So, or is the answer much simpler than that? Is God of War will be on both systems, PS4 and PS5, but the PlayStation 5 with will have all the latest sort of technological advancements, and it will be cutting edge. And the PS4 version will just have all these advancements switched off, just like the Unreal Engine apparently allows for, right, in terms of its features being switched off in order to scale it back, right? So it's operational on next gen, current gen, and all the way down to, tablets and even mobile phones, right? So is this even possible? Is this how studios, in terms of cost and structure, are being restructured? Requiring so much more development resources so now everybody's going multi-format, hence software prices are also going up because of this. I mean, whoever gets true cross-gen titles spot on first will be the talk of the town, in my opinion. You can't underestimate the value of being first in anything, right, when it comes to gaming, right? And no wonder the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller is getting so much traction here, there, and everywhere. The only game engine I see in development that can deliver cutting-edge advancements to render PS5's argument that Sony's first-party games look the best, perform the best, creatively the best, narratively the best, is perhaps, and I've already said this, but it's probably Playground Games, right? Even though I'm a big Fable fan, but it's the first game that comes to mind, Final Fantasy 16 aside, right? Everyone else seems to right now be using the Unreal Engine 4.2 and awaiting the Unreal Engine 5. So that's what's going on in my mind, my uneducated mind, I would say, layman terms, since I love 2018, right? Spider-Man and God of War were the pinnacle of this generation for me, right? So feel free to pick the bones out of that, gents.
Well, let me put my opinion, and we'll come to Michael to correct me one way or the other. But I think perhaps Jim Ryan and Sony's marketing department, and obviously Jim Ryan being the front man, I think he's lost a little bit of credibility potentially over the way that obviously some of this information was delivered, particularly after the event on a Twitter post. And I think it came as a big surprise to a lot of people. So I think that's dented a few people's sort of faith in him a little bit. And I think lots of questions have been asked around the new God of War game. Actually, is it going to be a PS4, a cross-platform, or are they going to really leverage the PS5 hardware? But this is the bit I'm going to kind of pitch to you, Michael. So, the PS4, PS5, both x86 processors, obviously GPUs, vastly different in terms of performance and output. I guess the biggest difference is obviously the I/O, obviously with the NVMe SSDs. Does with having the same style processor x86 and stuff, I mean, things should be very scalable, shouldn't they? I mean, you should be able to scale back graphics, you should be able to turn off ray tracing, you should be able to scale back sort of processor and some AI functions as well. But, we've seen it on PCs. There's a vast swathe of settings that you can turn up, down, or off. I'm guessing from a game design point of view, so something like Ratchet and Clank Rifts Apart, where you absolutely need the speed of that I/O to load in worlds instantly, that simply can't be done on PS4. But if God of War aren't aiming for that, then surely it's highly scalable and is possibly a PS4 title as well.
There's absolutely no reason why it wouldn't be, but I mean, I'm not going to put me on a pedestal. I don't know. So it all depends on what the team are aiming for and what their desires are. But everything's possible if you have enough talent, team, and budget. That's really the reality of it. developing for cross-generation titles doesn't mean you can't scale. All engines are built to scale now. They all allow you to do things on a visual level. It's almost a non-conversation now to know that you can just turn off post-processing features off. You can take a different path that's cheaper. You can use different solutions. There's all these options that are there. So the biggest benefit will for the bringing it back to the point, the Series S won't limit the generation because it fundamentally can do everything that the Series X can do. It won't limit it any more than the Series X. That's the reality of it. It might struggle earlier in the generation. That's for definite, because when you get a 1440 1080p game running at 30 FPS that wants to push the boat out in the Series X, what do you do with the Series S? But that's probably not for now, and that's never going to be probably an issue with Xbox because they want to push 4K. But let's take God of War as an example. If they're going to scale the engine, it all depends on what they're doing as a game mechanic or a gameplay process more than visual. So you can still take those out. The classic example was, I think, beginning this generation. What was the Lord of the Rings game? The one with the Nemesis system. What was it called?
Shadow of Mordor.
Yes, yeah. So that launched on last gen, and it had the Nemesis system completely removed. Because it didn't have the RAM, really. That was the reality of it. It couldn't handle all that, and the CPU calculations was allegedly the reason, but it's more likely RAM. So you can take out game mechanics of a game, but is it the same game anymore? And I think it all comes down to what the choices are. So, for example, we don't know what Horizon Forbidden West is going to be in terms of gameplay on the PS5 to the PS4, and it used to happen many years ago. If you played games on different consoles, that there were completely different experiences, same title, same game, but like Aladdin for the SNES and the Mega Drive were different games. So you could have a game that fundamentally has the same story but has huge parts that are different. So you could be able to fly in Forbidden West, fly and all the things they could do, and on the PS4 you can't. You can only ride animals on the ground. That function is completely gone. So if they're going to do that, are they going to do that? I don't know. It's completely hypothetical, but the reality is that it doesn't. Sony are big enough, clever enough, and as VJ quite rightly pointed out, they intermingle their skills and technology. You can almost see what's going to come up next when you look at some of their games that come out now. You can see the path they're going, and they share technology. So the possibilities of what could happen on the PS5 will always be limited slightly, but that could be overcome by budget and team and outsourcing and other people's solutions. So I wouldn't get too panicked about whether or not the game itself is running on PS4. It's just about, is it going to be a great game for me? And I think Spider-Man proves that. It doesn't look last gen, does it? It looks next gen, yet it's running on the PS4. And probably people will see the PS4 version and think, oh my God, that looks horrible. And I think that's the problem. You almost get used to the level you've been brought up to. But if you look at Spider-Man, then go back and look at the Spider-Man from 2018, there's stark differences in the quality. And I think that's what Sony are trying to do. They're trying to give everyone the experience of next generation first, but they're trying to do it by not alienating their entire title. In fact, there was exactly the same thing with the PS4 Pro, but I think they got that slightly wrong. It was almost not quite good enough by not alienating the PS4 team. There was a few great titles on it, but I think by and large, and I said this when I reviewed the PS4 Pro, I would stick with the PS4. I don't think you're going to miss much. And I think at the end of the generation, that's true. If you were obsessed about 4K, better image quality and better performance, then yes, it was worth it. But if you wanted to play and experience the same games, it wasn't. And I think we're going to see that on some of these cross-gen games. You're going to see a less advanced, less pristine, less enjoyable and visually splendid experience, but it will still be there. But if you're that way inclined, you'll instantly see the value of the PS5 version. Therefore, you'll buy the PS5, and I think that's fundamentally what they'll go for.
Yeah, no, absolute valid points, and I do completely agree. I guess as an Xbox community, we are an ultra sensitive bunch, and I think a lot of us feel that the sort of the narrative when Microsoft first came out and said that they were going to be supporting backwards compatible or sort of cross-generation titles, the narrative was, well, games will be held back and they won't be able to progress forward and stuff. And, I guess from a game design point of view, there are some instances where that could be the case. But I think, I'm guessing the Medium is probably a fair example of that. But, things like Call of Duty and most platformers, and again, perhaps Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is another example where an SSD is needed. But, in the whole, I think game design isn't going to change so radically over the next year or so that like you say, you can't go backwards and support your current generation of console. Okay.
I think it's all about it. Sorry, I just want to finish off. I think it's all about if you have to support PS4 for longer than the generation crossover period, i.e. the next 12 months, then it will start limiting them. Absolutely. But I think this is just that early stage where they don't want to miss out on keeping people happy, but more importantly, getting that return back on the investment, because these are not cheap games to make. Horizon looks like it's going to be right up there with one of their biggest. So they need that revenue just to get that the money back into the pot to do the next big game. So there's that compromise they have to make. The question is it a big compromise? I don't think it is, but short term, it's not going to affect it. Long term, it would, but Sony have no plans to do that. And I don't think Microsoft have either. I don't think you'll see the Xbox One around for very long in terms of Microsoft plans.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that makes, like you say, it makes perfect business sense, and there needs to be a transition. So, no, I very appreciate your comments, Jen. So, let's finish on the chat, because the chat's been really good tonight. And we have neglected the chat a little bit, so I do apologise, guys. So, Talon 69's asked, and we've kind of answered this, but we'll go through. Out of everyone on a panel, what is your next gen system of choice if you could only choose one? So, I'll go first. Mine's very clear. Mine would be an Xbox Series X, obviously. Day one, without a shadow of a doubt, but I am planning to get a PS5 as soon as I can, basically. Pucks?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards a Series X as well, although I don't think I will necessarily be launch straight away, because I know I can play some of this content on my PC to begin with.
I ran a poll on Twitter that I found was really interesting, because I asked the percentage of people that were going to get a Series X or S on all access, and I think it came out at about 20% were going to consider all access. I thought that was a really good thing from Microsoft. I'm surprised not many people are going to sort of take up on the offer, but perhaps that's the second, if not third, wave of sort of gamers that may take Microsoft up on that offer.
We say that, but regarding all access, we did have a few questions in the chat about what all access even is. So I suppose is the message being put across correctly from Microsoft? That all access is a thing.
Clearly not, because it's actually been around since the Xbox One X days, and you could actually, they actually touted it that if you went on the all access with the Xbox One X, then you got a free Series X. Well, I say free, you could carry on paying the subscription and get Series X out of it as well. So perhaps Microsoft's marketing is lacking slightly there. VJ, PS5, Xbox Series X or S or PC?
I was going to say stick with the Nintendo Switch. But, tacking on the back of what Michael said, I think fundamentally, if I want to play Spider-Man, if I can get a PS5, but if the difference isn't significant, or sorry, I should say, if it is significant in terms of performance, engagement, and playability, then definitely I'd go for a PlayStation 5.
Okay, that's interesting. Luke, you said PS5 for Demon's Souls alone, I'm guessing.
And Spider-Man, yeah.
And Spider-Man. Michael, same for you?
Yeah, same for me. Yeah.
See, Wandering Dutch came up with a very good point, really. It's not so much the titles, because on paper, and this has been touted this week, that Microsoft actually have more first-party titles in the oven, as it were, than Sony, as has been declared so far. Whether that's the actual case, we don't know. But Wandering Dutch has said, actually, this seems to come down to a launch title thing, because, so Luke and Michael have both said that they'd want a PS5 day one because of Demon's Souls, obviously a launch title. It just makes me wonder if our opinions might be slightly different if Halo Infinite was actually launching with the Series X, and whether that might be enough to overpower Demon's Souls or not really.
I think, go on. Sorry, just I think that is a valid argument, because if you said you can't have your PC, but you can have one of these consoles at launch, and the Series X was launching with Halo, and let's say one other title, doesn't have to be a particularly big one, then it might be different for me, right? So because Halo is one of my favorite franchises of all time, and that might swing me either way. So I just think right now that if I mean, and again, it all depends on what you're interested in terms of gaming, because a lot of people might not be interested in either Demon's Souls or Spider-Man, but they might be really interested in Valhalla, right? And they might really want to play that on a Series X, because they just typically play it on an Xbox. So, but yeah, I think if the launch lineups were different, then my answer might be different. If if I don't have a PC, because I do. So.
Well, to be honest, both yourself, Luke, and Mark, you've helped answer a question that was in my head, because obviously I don't think many people would agree or disagree, actually, that postponing the launch of Halo Infinite was the right thing to do. It absolutely was the right thing to do, and I'm almost pleased that Microsoft showed Halo Infinite in the state that they did at the July showcase, because we can all pitch in our heads now why it needs to be delayed, because lots of times you get game developers saying, well, we need to delay this game because it's not ready, and that's all you get. We could actually see that it wasn't ready this time, so I think it sits a lot easier in people's minds. But the question I had was, is this actually going to damage Microsoft in any way? And in some respects, I was thinking, no, it's probably not at all, actually. But in terms of people that are possibly sitting on the fence and perhaps want something desperate for launch day, perhaps it might. Not long term, but perhaps short term it might. Pux, what else have we got going on in the conversation?
So a comment just came in from Dragonwolf, actually, which I think's very, very accurate, or at least something good, which is very true and up and coming. So they say, I also think Sony will release more and more on PC. Jim Ryan does not want to leave that money on the table. He was the CFO and knows money, not fanboyism. And I think it's very true. Yeah, we've seen a lot more PlayStation titles start to make their way to PC. And I think if you are a PC gamer, PC has been my main system for a couple of years now. And if I know that I've got my main PlayStation titles coming to PC, for me, that's a great way for me to jump in, and yet I don't then have to fork out for a PlayStation.
I completely agree. And to be honest, I mean, I am trying to wrap the show up, guys, but you keep bringing up points that are fantastic. And actually, it was a bullet point that I'd had planned for tonight. So I'm going to go just to one person for the sake of time. Who shall I go to? What was the question? Well, let's go to you, Michael. Let's go to you. So with PCs, the majority of Xbox games coming to PC and some PS5 games coming to PC, is there, if you've got a semi-decent rig, is there actually any point owning a PS5 and an Xbox Series X, or might as well just hang on to your PC and get one or the other? Because there is a push at the moment, particularly, well, Microsoft have been doing it for a long time, but Sony seem to be doing it more and more, pushing their software onto PC. So is actually, if you've got a semi-decent rig, is a PS5 essential, and the same for Microsoft?
And I think Dragonwolf's right. It is about money, but it's also about establishing the brand and spreading the brand. I think it was touched on earlier that if you've got a game like Horizon, which recently came out, 4 years after it came out on consoles, it's not giving you money anymore. So I think there's a couple of reasons why I think Sony will do this. They won't do it day one. So the question will be, do you want a PS5? You can leave it if you want to wait 3 years to play the great big game that everyone else will be seeing this year, for example. So God of War 2 will probably be 3 or 4 years if it launches on PC before it launches on PC. Can you wait that long? Then it's worth it. Absolutely. Keep your PC and wait. But the benefit that they've got is, one, they'll get revenue because they'll get money back for something that they wouldn't have got before. So when the games stop making money on their platform, they can then make more money on the other platform. But more importantly, it'll also hit PS Now at the same time. And if you make a PC version on PS Now, you can run it much cheaper in your farms online in a cloud solution, and also increase the performance by running it at much higher frame rates and therefore lowering the latency, giving you a much better experience on PS Now. So there's many reasons why they'll do it. It just depends on how lucrative it is. I mean, everyone remembers back when Microsoft started this, they weren't jumping full feet into going to PC, but it took off and it worked for them. So they embraced it full on. So halfway through this generation, they were looking at it, towing the water, end of the generation, fully done it. Sony will never go like that, but they will probably release certain titles after 3 years on PC. It won't stop because it's going to make them money. And there's other edge cases and benefits that come alongside that.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And very valid point, to be honest. Puxley, what else is going on in the chat? Like I say, I'm desperately trying to wrap the show up before we go into sort of 2.5 hour territory.
There's not much more in terms of real new questions. We had one from earlier from Fun Speculation saying, in a way, these mid-gen refreshes are ruining our perception of the quality jump between generations.
That's a fair point. Luke, would you say that's a fair comment? I think it probably is, to be honest.
Depends on if you game on PC or not, I think.
Oh, well, yeah, no, that's a valid point.
I think I'm not sure I agree with that actually.
Okay.
Purely because the mid-gen refreshes, that their sole kind of defining rationale for their existence was just to increase frame buffer, just to increase resolution, to bring us up to a new era of high resolutions across console gaming. If you look at kind of any of the games, they don't, or the vast majority don't do anything additional in terms of in terms of their rendering. There's not vast swathes of extra geometry added and more detail everywhere, etc. It's purely a res bump. So not for me, but I think to be fair, there is a valid point in that you can't, you're not going to get the same wow factor now when you go into a new generation as you might have done with, say, an Xbox One X in particular, because there's not going to be an increase in your res any more than there already was. You're going to have the same res, although you will have a massive frame rate jump for a lot of games, which will be that wow factor. So I think there's more wow factors to come. I just think we're early in the generation. We're cross-gen. It's never the most impressive period of a console's life. So let's reevaluate that question maybe 2-3 years time when we see things like Fable and Naughty Dog's next game and all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, valid point. Like you say, these generations take a while to get going, and as was alluded to, the full benefit of the hardware that we've got this time is going to take a little while to get up and running. And like you say, PC kind of spans the gap, doesn't it, to a certain degree, because obviously it's so scalable. I'm guessing, if these, so let's imagine Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart does come to PC. I mean, I'm guessing that's going to be pushing some pretty high PC specs, particularly around the sort of SSD requirements and things like that. If it is, SSD heavy in terms of sort of usage, I guess. But I think that kind of wraps this up, to be honest. VJ, is there anything else you want as a closing shot for today's topic?
No, I'm all good. Thank you. It's been a fantastic show so far.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this, mate. Thank you very much to the panel, guys. I know I say this every week, but you guys, you give us the most precious thing you can, is your time, and I'm really grateful for you to do that. Guys in the chat, you have been phenomenal today. You really have. It's been quite outstanding. I quite like the to-ing and fro-in between each other, but obviously, throwing a few curveballs our way as well. And it's absolutely fine to disagree with people. Because that's the nature of the beast. So, okay, well, let's just do a bit of a closing round then. So, Pucks, it's been a good show today. I've enjoyed today. Where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at PuxleyAR, and I'm also on Xbox as simply Puxley as well. So you can find me on either of those places.
You can, and we obviously put out the odd video. Pucks did one. You did one on the Cold War Alpha, didn't you, the other day?
I did, yeah. I did a PlayStation 4 capture of the Cold War Alpha. So if you guys haven't checked it out yet, by all means, give it a look and see what you think. Yeah,
cool. VJ, where can we find you on socials?
Maybe not in the social media, probably in a cupboard having a bacon sandwich and a cup of tea. But,
you do like your bacon sandwiches, don't you?
Yeah, I do. The bacon's terrible over here. It's nowhere near as. There's several things, but that might be another podcast on itself. But yeah, you can find me at Viewpoint Gaming, or you can find me here on Sundays at Green Pass Gaming, or on Thursdays over on Boom's channel.
Excellent. Luke, where can we find you?
Yeah, great show. Thanks for having me, guys. You can find me at LukeSteele90 on Twitter, and that's pretty much it because work consumes my life. So very rarely on anything else apart from this because I really enjoy it. I
do have a question for you. When is your 3080 due to arrive? When does that come through the post?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I ordered it with a retailer in the UK called Overclockers, which I'm sure is familiar to many people who order PC parts, and they have had what can only be described as an absolute nightmare with their 380 kind of pre-order process. So the full answer to the question is I'm expecting it sometime before the end of the year, but I don't know when it is, and also Overclockers have taken my money already. So so who knows, really? I could get it next year. I have no idea. I don't know, Michael, if you've pre-ordered one as well through someone like Overclockers and you've had a similar message, but it's the Wild West out there at the moment.
Yeah, I don't want to digress too much, but I know suppliers are meant to be October. That expect that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I'd heard October, but okay. Well, that's good. Exciting times ahead, Luke. You'll be able to do some benchmarking on the new crisis, which is Flight Sim.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Let us know how you get on with that, and we owe a thanks and a congratulations to Michael, because today I believe you hit 40,000 subs on your YouTube channel.
Did I?
You did. You don't even know, do you? Yes, I've been tracking that. So you were at 40,000, 40K earlier on. So
I tell you what, that's good. That's great. Thank you. I didn't even know that. No, it's been good. I've gone up quite a lot in the past couple of months. So yeah, it's been great. Thank you very much, each and everyone that has subscribed.
Yeah, that's not a problem. And to be honest, since we're in comparison, we are an absolute, drop in the ocean. But, even for us at this level, we know and understand that you have to earn and keep every single sub. And that's not easy to do. It's not like Twitter where you follow someone and they follow you back. You have to earn your subs. And, someone who hits 40,000 subs, you absolutely deserve it, my friend. And it's a testament to the quality of the output of your channel. That there's no two ways about it. You can't argue with 40,000 subs. They've come your way and they've stayed there. And that's absolutely fantastic to see. So keep it up with the good videos. I mean, I've been a subscriber for a long time now, and I hope Luke doesn't mind me saying this, but when he realized you were coming on the show, he said, make sure I've got an invite for that one. It's like, yep, absolutely, my friend. So it's been an absolute pleasure, Michael. I'd love you to come back on the show if you're willing at some point, but keep up the good work. So where can we find you on the socials?
I'm on Twitter. It's at N_X_G, not the best name, but I'm not a social media god. And then on YouTube, it's just NX Gamer. So again, appreciate everyone the nice things you just said there, man. I really do appreciate it, and everyone that said nice things about me. But don't put me or anyone else on a pedestal. I'm not saying anyone is, but I don't like that. So I'm just some guy doing stuff on YouTube, and it's a passion that I've got, and I've worked in technology for years. So it's not as if for me, it's just like bread and butter stuff. But I'm glad that at least I offer something that's a little different and a little bit honest and hopefully educational or entertaining, at least. Not educational sounds like patronising. I'm not trying to be patronising, but yeah, it's great. I really appreciate you guys inviting me on here. It's been an excellent chat. Great points. Love discussion. Absolutely live for discussion and disagreements. That's what it's all about. So thank you very much for having me, and I would love to come back if you would put up with me again. Yeah,
absolutely, my friend. And don't underestimate yourself. 40,000 people is a football stadium worth of people, and that's a lot of people. It is. Chat, you have been phenomenal. Thank you very much. Let's do this again next week. I've got a couple of guests. We've got Archimedes hopefully coming on next week, and and a surprise. I will keep it to myself, actually. So, guys, thank you very much. We'll do it again next week. Thank you very much, panel. Thank you very much, chat. Thanks for being with us. And until next time, goodbye.
Thank you.